Kolodzey Family Archive Video Number 6.2, Joannes Kolodzey and Mary Lacny. Joannes Kolodzey and Maria Lacny were born in a portion of the Austria-Hungary Empire that would later be known as Slovakia. Joannes Kolodzey was born on the 12th of February, 1861 in Jarabina, Slovakia, just north of Stara Lubovnia. Joannes was baptized 5 days later on the 17th of February, 1861 at St. Nicholas's Roman Catholic Church located in the town square of Stara Lubovnia, where his father and his father's siblings, as well as his older sister Maria Kolodzey, later a Michalkevitz, had been baptized before him. He was the second child born to Joannes Kolodzey and Maria Tokarszky. His godparents are listed as Andreas Kolodzey and Maria Molasani. His godfather is likely his uncle, but may have been his grandfather. There is a house that stands at 221 Jarabina today. This is unlikely the same house, but perhaps the current basement was the original house. Mary Lacny was either born in August 1860 per her response on the 1900 U.S. Census or in May of 1859 per the 1905 census done by New Jersey. As of today, we still do not have a pinpoint date or location for her birth. There are several candidates, but none of the records match the two dates. Joannes married Mary Lacny in 1886 per the 1900 U.S. Census. Because the marriage was in Stara Lubovnia, and marriage records thereafter 1872 have not been made available, we do not have a copy of that document. Joannes and Mary had 4 children during their marriage. Their oldest, Mary V, was the only child of theirs born in Slovakia. Mary V was born on the 4th of February, 1889 in Stara Lubovnia. Perhaps the V in her name stood for Victoria. Her middle initial appears on her obituary and the search for evidence of her full middle name is ongoing. Sometime around the birth of Mary V, Joannes immigrated to the United States aboard the SS Paularia. The vessel departed from Hamburg, Germany and arrived in the United States on the 25th of February, 1889, just 3 weeks after Mary V's birth. We are fairly certain that the ship's passenger record shown is our Joannes, who was in fact 27 years old in 1881 and was from Lublo. On the manifest, he listed his occupation as a shoemaker. But, after his arrival in New York City, Joannes found work as a laborer in the oil industry in nearby Bayonne, New Jersey. Bayonne during the late 1800s was a burgeoning hub in the oil industry, and the city's proximity to major transportation networks along the Hudson River allowed it to flourish as a vital point for the oil trade. After a year or so of being in the United States, he sent for his wife Mary and his daughter Mary V to join him. It is interesting to point out that as hard as it is for new mothers in modern times, it pales in comparison to making your way from a small town in Slovakia across Europe in the 1880s to board a ship sailing across the Atlantic with crowded conditions for 2 weeks as a lone parent with a newborn child in tow. Nonetheless, Mary and her new baby made the voyage, arriving in the US in 1890. On Valentine's Day, the 14th of February, 1891, Joannes and Mary's son John Stephen Kolodzey was born in Bayonne, New Jersey. 19 months later, Anna Kolodzey was born on the 13th of September, 1892, also in Bayonne. A little over 2 years after that, Anthony John Kolodzey was born on the 22nd of November, 1894, also in Bayonne. Joannes and Mary's family were complete when the 1895 New Jersey census taker visited the family. Although there was no additional information found on the census, it did validate that Johannes's family was living in Bayonne's 5th ward after young Anthony was born. When the U.S. Census Bureau visited the family in 1900, Joannes and Mary's family of 6 were living on the northwesterly side of East 22nd Street at House 213. At the time, John worked as a laborer in the oil yards. The working conditions in the oil yards were harsh, and laborers were exposed to toxic fumes and the constant risk of fires and explosions. One of the most significant events in Bayonne's oil industry was the catastrophic explosion and fire that occurred in July of 1900. The fire burned for 70 hours, causing widespread destruction that left behind toxic ashes and smoke. This all occurred less than a block away from Joannes and Mary's home. In 1905, the New Jersey census showed the family still living at 213 East 22nd Street. It also shows Johannes listed as senior and his oldest son John as a junior. John Stephen Kolodzey Jr. was 14, but already a laborer in the oil yards. As you can see from the picture, the oil yards were literally across the street. By 1910, the family lived at 75 East 25th Street in Bayonne's 5th Ward. Johannes, then 49 years old, was still working as a laborer in the oil yards. The census taker noted Joannes spoke English, while his wife Mary mainly spoke Slovak. Their eldest, Mary V, had moved out and was living with her own family. Johannes's sons John and Anthony were also laborers in the oil yards while daughter Anna worked in the silk mill. The census showed that Johannes and Mary owned the home that they lived in at 75 East 25th Street. On the 2nd of February, 1912, Johannes's beloved wife Mary passed away in Bayonne. Johannes and Mary had been married for 26 years. She was laid to rest at the Holy Name Cemetery in Jersey City. Years later, she was joined at the same grave site by her 3-month-old granddaughter Josefina in 1917 and later in 1978 by her daughter Anna Kishadai. The New Jersey census of 1915 showed the family still living at 75 East 25th Street. John Sr. was the head of the household as a widower who had resided in the U.S. for 26 years but had not yet been naturalized. He could read and speak English but could not write, and he was the owner of a mortgaged home. John's daughter Anna and her husband George Kishadai were renters at the same address. In 1920, Johannes was still residing at 75 East 25th Street per the U.S. Census. His son John was listed as the head of the household. Johannes was 60 years old but was listed as sick and was unemployed because of it. It is said that Johannes died within a year of the 1920 census. However, to date, no records have been found to validate this. Nonetheless, Johannes and Mary's legacy endures through their 4 children and 10 grandchildren that gave them more than 25 great-grandchildren. Their oldest daughter Mary V married Charles Ronkowitz on the 14th of November, 1908. They had 3 children and 11 grandchildren. 2 of those grandchildren are DNA-verified matches to the rest of the Kolodzey family. Johannes and Mary's second child, John Stephen Kolodzey, married Mary Pargansky on the 3rd of June, 1916. They had 1 son that gave them 4 grandchildren. Johannes and Mary's third child, Anna Kolodzey, married George Kishadai in 1913. They had 4 children that gave them 9 grandchildren and 12 great-grandchildren. After Georgius's death, the widowed Anna married George C. Brandt, who died a few years later. Johannes and Mary's 4th and youngest child, Anthony John Kolodzey, married Anna Kolvek on the 3rd of June, 1920. They had 2 daughters that gave them 4 grandchildren. This concludes the story of Johannes Kolodzey and Mary Lacny until further research reveals more information. If you like this presentation, please select the like button and subscribe for future updates and releases.